there was a group behind me. The group ahead of me I couldn't see anymore. And I got to a certain point and I'm going, which way is it? And it was pretty sure, but it would have been easy to turn around and go a different way, and then I don't know what would happen.
Welcome to In the Parks, part of the Get Indiana podcast network, and what is usually an Indiana State Parks podcast. I'm Allison Martin, and I'm excited to take you on a family trip to learn about some amazing places outside the Hoosier State. Think of this as a little field trip or a brief side quest. I think our parks, state and national, show off the best of America, but there's so much more to them than you might expect. So it's time to go in depth to really know the stories and discover what makes each destination unique and valuable as part of the U.S. On a short season 2 of In the Parks, you'll learn about the people, legends, and places that formed Utah's Mighty 5 national parks. Today, we're going to Capitol Reef National Park. Our visit to Capitol Reef started with some fun the night before in Torrey, Utah. After driving from Bryce Canyon, we stayed at Broken Spur Inn. We rented 3 Conestoga wagons, the kind you'd see on the cover of Little House on the Prairie books. There are traditional rooms too, but the wagons were really cool and the kids loved them. They were big. My mom and I shared a king-size bed, and my 2 nieces took the bunk bed. There was also room for a mini fridge and a small table. Each wagon has its own bathroom and shower, and a centrally located bathhouse. There's a pool, hot tub, fire pit, restaurant, and we got breakfast there the next morning. Here's my mom, who found the Conestoga wagons and was excited to stay somewhere less traditional.
So we drove to Capitol Reef, which thankfully where we stayed was a great choice because it was like 5 minutes from the entrance.
Yes, that was very nice.
And there were a couple other options there. If you want a traditional hotel, great. If you want to try something different.
Yeah. The wagons were so fun. The girls were in bed, and I was telling Cora goodnight, and she said, this was the best day ever, because she's sleeping in this wagon, and she's the one that loves Little House on the Prairie, so she felt like she was Cora Laura.
Only drawback, which if you're used to camping, you're used to hearing other people talking at night. If you're not used to camping, in the wagons you could hear everything that everybody was saying next to you, which I was a little concerned was going to keep me awake, but I think I still fell asleep by 10, so I was really happy about that.
Even though we had an air-conditioned room and comfy bed, I feel like we got a little taste of what staying in them would have been like because of the noises we heard in the night.
Well, at first it sounded like someone was dragging their suitcase across a driveway. And then I thought, okay, is someone walking on the rocks outside? No, that wasn't it. And finally, I determined it was the wind. And that was.
Okay, I thought that there were squirrels or chipmunks running up one side of the wagon top and running all the way across to the other end, and we were just hearing their little nails like scurrying across the fabric like that, and I couldn't understand what they were catching onto that they were going to be able to do that. It was so, and then I also finally was like, oh, this is the wind. Did you even hear it?
Yeah, well, I woke up in the night and I thought it was raining because it sounded kind of like it was raining before I realized it was just windy.
Yeah, so, and it's not even that windy. It's like a 10 or 11 mile gusts of wind. So I can't imagine what it would have been like to be out here sleeping or living, and it's like a legitimate 20 mile an hour gust, 30 mile an hour gust, because those would happen out here, and that would have been so scary.
Well, I thought too, with the wind, after a while I liked it. It was kind of like white noise. But then I thought, okay, back in the day when they really traveled in these wagons, what if it was raining too and windy? How loud that would be. And a little frightening.
It was really interesting to think about settlers moving across the prairies and western part of the country in these wagons. I started to imagine all the things they experienced, from thunderstorms and tornadoes to the bison migration, all inside these wagons. The wind moving us back and forth through the night also reminded me of a creaking ship and eventually lulled me into a sound sleep. Now, like I said, the great thing about where we stayed was how close we were to the park, mere minutes away. Capitol Reef has a very different feel from the other parks we'd been to, and within the park, it has very different experiences for people. There are both rugged trails through rocks and barren landscapes, and a lush green valley full of fruit trees and history. It's a less frequently visited park, but my hope is to prove to you why it's worth a trip. First, rugged rocks and rare geology. Then we'll get to the pie. Yes, this park has the best food. As we drove into Capitol Reef, I could tell immediately that we were seeing a different type of mountain landscape than we'd been in before. I didn't understand what it was until the visitor center, so you get information right away. Capitol Reef is comprised of a rock formation called the Water Pocket Fold. It's about 100 miles long and is called a monocline or wrinkle. Okay, cool. What's a monocline? From my best understanding, it's a fold in the earth that resembles steps. You can see it clearly at Capitol Reef as some rock layers appear horizontal, but other rock layers are at an angle. Some types of rock are more flexible than others, so when fault lines lifted some land up, the more flexible layers of rock draped over the layers beneath them. Essentially, all the things that can happen to rocks are happening at Capitol Reef. This area of Utah is one where you can visibly see these processes, and it's why the park looks different on one side than the other. Add in the Fremont River, and you've got yet another variable that created the park's scenery. We started our day passing Chimney Rock, then took a gravel road back to a parking lot where two trailheads begin. We started with Goosenecks Overlook, which was only about a 600-foot trail, but had some very big drop-offs.
The path was not well marked, but we figured it out and ended up clear out of this point of a rock, overlooking a huge valley.
I think it was 800 feet below, I think is what it said. With a little river thing running through it that it said fed all the way to the Colorado River.
That was neat.
The same parking lot led to Sunset Point, where the trail was a third of a mile. And this was an awesome trail.
But that was cool because you walked out, you didn't realize how far you're going, and you looked across kind of a valley, and you saw people on a rock, and it was like, there's people over there? And then you realize,
I'm going there.
Right, that's where we're going. So then you hike kind of all this half loop around, and then you're at that big spot.
Yeah, and it was beautiful.
Sunset Point was great on its own, but from the top of the rocks we climbed up, you could see another massive climb, and my brothers decided to take it on.
And then Andy noticed that there was another rock even further out that was pretty high.
And it was calling his name.
So he, David, and my niece all figured out a way over there, which took them a little while because it wasn't a clear path either. Right. There were definitely some treacherous climbs, and we were watching them from the other high rock, kind of looking over there. And it was cool because you could see them troubleshoot, like try something, didn't work, reroute, found another way. They disappeared for a while, then they finally appeared between the little crevices and then tried a couple of different ways to get to the top. And finally, all three of them made it up there.
Meanwhile, I'm hoping that none of them fall or get injured because I didn't know how we would ever get them out of there when there's no cell service.
Here's my brother Andy describing the extra section they hiked.
The hike at Capitol Reef, that Sunset Point hike, was probably one of the cooler places, like views we saw. A couple pictures that you took of us when we went over to climb up that other rock. Like that spot, something with the morning light and just the layers of like different stuff in that photograph. It's like you have this canyon, was it the Goosenecks Canyon on your right that just cut down? You've got some pillars off on the far left edge just sticking straight up. You have that rock feature in the middle. You've got some other ridges in the background. Then you've got the mountains layered behind that. And it was just like, what in the world? Like, what a crazy spot. And for how easy that hike was, it was a short little trail. Was it a third of a mile or something? It wasn't very hard, but it was just such a crazy cool view. That was a neat spot.
To say I was jealous is an understatement. I was, however, entrusted with photography duty and got some epic pictures and videos of them climbing this rock formation. Capitol Reef was the first park we visited where trails were less clearly marked. Even though it was only a third of a mile, the path wasn't as easy to follow, and if you're not good at orienteering, it wouldn't take much to get lost.
Right. It was pretty clear that if you were not paying attention or didn't know where you were going, you could get lost really easily out there.
Because I was walking back, there was a group behind me, the group ahead of me I couldn't see anymore, and I got to a certain point and I'm going, which way is it? And it was pretty sure I knew, and I was correct, but it would have been easy to turn around and go a different way, and then I don't know what would happen.
Another trail we did that I loved was the one to Hickman Bridge. It's about 2 miles round trip. The bridge is 133 feet across and 125 feet tall, so it's an impressive sight. It looks like an arch, but is apparently formed differently, so scientifically, it's a bridge. My dad, brother, and I took on this hike, and I like this one a lot because it started and ended along the Fremont River. Again, the contrast of red clay rocks, blue sky, and greenery beside the water was so striking. It's definitely a moderate trail, because you pick up almost 500 feet of ascent on the way out. But most of it was well maintained, pretty clearly marked, and had a mix of rocks and sand underfoot. There were clearly places where this was, or maybe is, a wash, Rocks were hollowed out and pockmarked, and there were smaller bridges we could climb on. The Hickman Bridge itself was truly magnificent and larger than I expected. There were vertical bands of brown and tan coloring on the bridge itself, while the rocks below were red. Standing under the bridge made me feel so small. It was also quite the experience because we could see dark clouds rolling in from the distance. It made the entire hike back feel even grander and more imposing. We hurried to the car, and thankfully the rain held off until we were on the road. There were a few trails we spotted and wished we could do. One, I'm not even sure how to say the name of it, but it looked intense, and it started near Gifford House. I think it's the Cohab or Cohab Canyon Trail. It looked as if it climbed up the rock face and would have had an amazing view of the orchards and river. Another was Cassidy Arch, which is accessed from Grand Wash. My brother Andy drove that way.
Yeah, well, and we drove back into the Grand Wash, which actually was pretty neat because you turn to go back on that road, and there's like signs there. And a lot of the signs, they'll say like, they give warnings about stuff like make sure you have enough water, don't do this, watch out for flash floods, etc. That one on the sign, I didn't see it at first. They just had a real life picture of cars like flooded up above their windows, like stuck in the wash, all like slammed up in the bank kind of thing, and having to get like rescued. They weren't giving you a cartoon. They weren't skirting it with just like, don't do that. It was just like, this is serious danger. Like, if you remember, there was a number of spots on that road where you would drive right through the wash, and it would change like to the concrete, kind of a rounded concrete that you'd go down over. And that was like, they used that to allow the wash to pass through the road. But yeah, you actually drove in the wash to go back into the Grand Wash hike area, and that's where Cassidy Arch Trail was, which actually looked pretty cool, but you had to go up quite a lot. Like, that was quite a hike to get up to.
I would have liked to do that one because that's one of the,
yeah.
I think that might be the only arch you can walk on top of.
Yeah, you could walk on that one. You can actually see it. We were driving on the road, and there's this sign that says Cassidy Arch, and it has an arrow kind of pointing up. And I'm like, there's no trail here. So I turned my head, and I was like, oh, it like kind of blended in. I was like, oh, you can see it up there. So I took like a pretty nice picture, and you could see people on top of it in the photo once I zoomed in and everything. It was pretty cool.
While I would have loved to do Cassidy Arch, I was thankful we could see most of the rock formations without doing strenuous hiking. We were 3 days into our trip, and a lot of people were still feeling the effects of the big hike from Bryce Canyon the day before. It made the scenic drive through Capitol Reef much appreciated.
We went on to the scenic route, and it was interesting then because some of the rock formations that we saw were similar to what we had already seen. But then, as we went along, there were other ones that were completely different. And there were places where it was more smooth instead of the hoodoo type shapes. And they were more almost like desert looking. And the further you got down, it seemed like it would change back and forth.
And you could really see the angle of like where the rocks had slid. So you could see the layers in them really clearly, and you see like one thing might be angled down while the part next to it is still pretty horizontal. So you could see a really cool contrast between the two things. The ones we saw on the scenic route looked to me more like when you see people on a baking show and they're making like croissants and they do like a layer and then there's butter and a layer and there's butter. Like, it was just like super crazy thin slabs. And that was also really different than other things that we saw.
The talk of croissants and baking has me ready to eat, and that's where we're headed next. But first, I have the perfect way you can show your love for Indiana's state parks. How about a new In the Parks hat to rep our home state's natural beauty? I'm selling hats that show love to our parks. They're fitted, lightweight, vented, and breathable. The hats are covered with images that represent the parks, like the iconic Brown County Lookout Tower, the arches from Rose Island at Charlestown, a firefly to represent harmony, and the red barn from Prophetstown. Plus, there's a fire tower you'll find at multiple state parks, a red-covered bridge as seen at Versailles, Turkey Run, and Cataract Falls, a ranger hat, bald eagle, and more. I designed the images and pattern, and I'm really happy with how they turned out. These are perfect for hiking, running, or time on the water. Check out the show notes for a link to buy your hat today. Now let's get back to Capitol Reef and eat some pie. As soon as you think you understand the geology and layout of the park, it switches up again.
Everything changes.
Yes.
Because the Fremont River also runs through the park. And so then we went to maybe everyone's favorite place of all today.
Yay! Fruita.
The tiny settlement Fruita was started in the 1880s by about 10 families who were Latter-day Saint pioneers. They used a one-room schoolhouse for education, religious services, and meetings. The Mormon settlers also took advantage of the fertile soil in the valley, which was watered by the Fremont River. They planted orchards, which are still in the park today. The Gifford family lived in Fruita until 1969, when they sold their property to the National Park Service. They were the last people to live here, and their home is still in use today for a very important purpose. And you need to go there because they have
pies that they make from scratch, from the fruit that they grow in the orchards that are right next to the Gifford House. And there's some other orchards we noticed other places in the park as well that have peach trees, apple trees, cherry trees. They must grow the rhubarb because they had that in the pie. And homemade ice cream that you could buy in little cups to go with your pie.
The pies are about 6 inches. Like, do you remember the personal pan pizza from Pizza Hut? You'd get them when you read a lot of books as a kid on summer vacation. Imagine that, but it's pie, not a pizza pie. With all these pie options, it was tough to decide what to get. So we made the only logical decision. We got 3: apple, strawberry rhubarb, and peach.
Which I ranked in order: peach, apple, strawberry, rhubarb. How would you rate them?
And I ranked apple, peach, strawberry, rhubarb because I'm not a big fan of rhubarb. That's just me.
But I think Dad would have ranked them
yes.
Strawberry, rhubarb, peach, apple.
Apple, exactly.
So,
yes.
But basically, all 3 of them were
so
A+
good
pies.
And that was our lunch. That was the best part. Like, we're grown-ups.
In addition to the fruit trees, I also saw almond and walnut trees, and we were almost there when apricots were ripe. They grow pears and plums too.
Also cool about that area was like, if things are in season, they'll open up the orchards and you can go and just pick stuff there for free.
Okay, wrong. You do have to pay. I had that information very wrong, so it's a good thing there wasn't any fruit in season, or I would have screwed that up. There are self-pay stations, and in the show notes, I'll link to information about the orchard. All of us liked the Fruita area. There were some horses, and it was a nice spot to pause for lunch.
They had a couple picnic areas, and it's like super lush and green because the river goes right through there. So it's crazy because you have these just massive rock features that you feel like you're in the desert, and then all of a sudden you're in this little oasis.
Right, with fruit growing.
There was also an old Latter-day Saint schoolhouse and some other history from the early Mormon settlers that we didn't have much time to see. In addition to that more recent history, Capitol Reef has some ancient markings too. You can see petroglyphs carved onto the rock face in a couple marked places. These go back thousands of years, and it's incredible you can still see them. Another thing to be sure to spot is Capitol Dome, a rock formation that mimics the Capitol building in D.C., and it's where the park gets its name. Look for it east of the Hickman Bridge area as you head out of the park. For us, it was time to move on. We drove a couple hours to Moab, to an Airbnb where we'd stay for several nights as we visited Canyonlands and Arches. And we didn't know it then, but there were plenty of great adventures ahead. Capitol Reef is perfect for 2 different types of people. It's great if you need scenic drives to immerse you in natural wonders and still want to get some delicious pie. And it's really ideal for someone who wants truly rugged, off-road style trails. It's not for the person who wants a sleek, clear, smooth trail or needs their hand held with every turn marked on a map. But if you're the kind of person who says, "Let me rely on my compass and common sense," you'll love exploring Capitol Reef. It injected just the right amount of beauty and adventure into our trip, and those are always things I'm looking for when I spend time in the parks. Next week, we're headed to Canyonlands National Park, where my brother David and I did some extreme off-roading with his 3-year-old daughter mic'd up in the car seat. There was a little bit of,
"It is bumpy." Whoa. That was scary. Daddy, slow down.
but by the end it was,
Daddy, that's cool.
In the Parks is part of the Get Indiana podcast network. If you love discovering what makes Indiana a great place, join thousands of Hoosiers keeping up with the latest and greatest happenings at getindiana.com. You can check out other podcasts, read blogs, and subscribe to the weekly newsletter. A big thanks to my mom and brother for letting me interview them for this episode. In the Parks is obviously not associated with the National Park Service, but like millions of other Americans, I am so grateful for the work they do for our parks. Be sure you visit intheparksonline.com to purchase your state parks hat, and I greatly appreciate your comments and reviews. That's what helps more people find this show. Thanks for listening, and I hope to see you in the parks.